Привет. I'm Chuck Olenek. I'm Ukrainian-American, baptized with the name Yaroslav, which is conveniently the name that I use in the Society for Creative Anachronism when I do historical reenactment. And one of the things that I've been doing since I got out of teaching, and I found myself still kind of teaching and still teaching it in the same way. I'm still wearing garb, but then that's also what I do on the weekends, with the SCA. And I talk about history stuff and culture stuff. One of the aspects of, or one of the areas of focus of this particular channel that I put together is about things in Eastern Europe, things that are Slavic. So I've been covering Slavic mythology and folklore. I have been telling folk tales or retelling them. I have been covering different aspects of the culture, but I found I had to also cover the history parts. And bringing history and telling that to SCA people is kind of like, there's a Slavic proverb of bringing a samovar to Tula, which was a place that made a whole bunch of samovars. And that's still something I want to try. So I've been covering different aspects of Kyivan Rus, or Kyiv. And I've covered what happens when a particularly powerful ruler dies, and usually what happens, because we Slavs tend to not get along with each other that well, you have brothers going to war on each other. So when Prince Vladimir dies, or Saint Vladimir, or Vladimir, if you're going with that different pronunciation, which is more Russian, he dies, his sons go to war on each other. And then eventually one of his sons, Yaroslav the Wise, becomes prince, and there's like a renaissance. And then when Yaroslav is dying, he's telling his sons, be nice to each other, play nice, share. And when he dies, they immediately go to war on each other. And, things look really dark, and it's all about getting control of the city of Kyiv. And then you end up with a period of time where Vladimir Monomach, or Vladimir Monomach, is in charge, and it's another type of renaissance like under Yaroslav. And then he dies, and things look really dark because people are all going to war on each other. And that was the way I pretty much described it in the last actual history video, of saying, okay, pretty much at the end of Kyivan Rus, or Kyiv, because the goal in, these different times was to get control of Kyiv. And there were different principalities, but those different principalities were usually assigned to younger sons. And the goal was eventually to get to Kyiv. Well, now we're going to hit a time period where that isn't the goal anymore. So the political unity of the Rus is going to fracture over the course of the 12th century, and that's going to leave like a bunch of little kingdoms that called themselves principalities, but they acted like little kingdoms, and that's in the 13th century. So this is about Vladimir Suzdal, which is a place, not a person. And let's get into it. The different kingdoms, officially principalities, centered in places as diverse as Halichia, Volhynia in the southwest, and Smolensk, which was along the mighty Dnipro River, and Novgorod in the far north. And then there's what we're going to be talking about, Vladimir Suzdal in the northeast, each having their own policies, their own chronicles, their own ecclesiastical authorities, which is a really big deal, and so forth. Okay, if you want to get the traditional story of the rise of power of Russia is basically the power shifting from Kyiv, the center of the Rus lands, to Vladimir Suzdal in the northeast, and that's going to be during the 12th and 13th centuries. And later that power, after the Mongols come through and they trash everything, later that power is going to shift to Moscow in the 14th century. Vladimir Suzdal, variously known as the Principality of Vladimir Suzdal, or Grand Principality of Vladimir, or Vladimir Suzdalian Rus, was one of the major principalities that succeeded Kyiv in the late 12th century and was centered in Vladimir on Glyazina. Where did Vladimir Suzdal come from? Well, it kind of grew out of the Principality of Rostov. Well, actually, that's more like a split of the principality. The Grand Prince of Vladimir ruled a territory approximately bounded by 3 rivers, the Volga, the Oka, and the northern Dvina. Okay, now you got a prince with a really cool name, Yuri Dolgoruki. Basically means long fingers, and it's not because he's a freak show or looks like Gollum. It's because of his grasping reach for power. And he was the 7th son of Volodymyr Monomach, and he reigned for a mere 2 years before his death in 1151, but he began the lineage of princes of Suzdal and Vladimir Suzdal. So Yuri Dolgoruki, or Long Fingers, or Long Arm, proclaims his son Andrei Bohulovsky Prince of Vyshhorod. That's a reward, because Andrei ended up accompanying him on the 2-year-long struggle to capture Kyiv, and he manages to achieve that in 1149 before he gets, driven out a couple of years later. But there, you can tell now that there's not a lot of love for Kyiv. Yuri is much more interested in the Principality and of Vladimir Suzdal. He's interested in fortifying Vladimir. In 1157, Andrei becomes knyaz, the prince of Vladimir, Rostov, and Suzdal. He started construction of the fortifications around the town of Vladimir in 1158, and he got that done about 6 years later, as well as a cathedral. And in 1162, Andrei sent an embassy to Constantinople. What he wanted was a separate metropolitan see in Vladimir, and that would give him more authority because now his town would also be the center of the church. Andrei starts flexing his muscles. The same year he finishes the fortifications around the town of Vladimir, right, which he's hoping is going to be the new capital. He attacks the Volga Bulgars, and he wins a victory, but he loses a son. Okay. But he's playing on a larger field now. And 20 years after capturing Kyiv with his father, Yuri Longfingers, he comes back in 1169, and his troops, Andrei's troops, sack Kyiv. Right? They're devastating it like never before, and plundering the city, and they're stealing a lot of religious artwork. Remember, Andrei wants the town of Vladimir to become the religious center as well. And he declares himself the Grand Prince, the Veliki Knyaz, except he's not going to rule from Kyiv. He's going to assign his brother Gleb to be the prince in Kyiv, but now being prince in Kyiv isn't the dominant position, it's a subordinate position. And Gleb's only going to rule there 2 years. He dies in 1171, and Andrei ends up getting involved in a 2-year-long struggle to hang on to Kyiv, because even though it's not going to be the ruling town, he still wants it, but he finally gets driven out in defeat. Andrei has been expanding his princely authority. He's running into conflicts with the boyars, the upper nobility, and that's going to give rise to a conspiracy where about 20 people burst into Andrei's chambers in 1174, and they really slashed up his arm. Sometimes it's described as cutting off his left arm, and slew him in bed. And of course, because he died in such a grisly way in 1702, Andrei was made a saint in the Russian Orthodox Church. Yuri Dolgoruki's eldest son, by his second marriage, Mikhailo Yurevich, was removed from the Suzdal lands by his half-brother Andrei, who was actually running things, because Andrei had a problem, apparently, with Mikhailo's mother. Okay, so more family drama. Andrei, right, he's the Grand Prince. He is going to appoint, after, the brother Hleb dies in 1171, he appoints his brother Mikhailo to go take the throne in Kyiv. All right, remember, one of the lesser towns now. And instead of going, Mikhailo sends his another brother, Vsevolod Bignest, really cool name, we'll get back to him later. Here, send him to Kyiv. When Andrei dies, Mikhailo takes over in Vladimir. Okay, now you have the nobles that are, the boyars that are in the towns of Suzdal and Rostov. They are really steamed, because now all the love seems to be going to the town of Vladimir. And because they are so hostile, Mikhailo has to leave for Chernihiv. And a guy named Yarapolk Rostislavich, he's a nephew of Andrei, he ends up becoming the Grand Prince for like about a year. And the citizens of Vladimir don't like this arrangement at all, and they kind of change their minds and go, Mikhailo, can you come back? And he does that. He defeats Andrei's nephew and regains the throne, and basically dies the next year. So brother Vsevolod, he's now going to be in charge. Vsevolod, the Big Nest, was the 10th or 11th son of Yuri Longfingers. Vsevolod took his brother Mikhailo aside in struggle against the powerful boyars of Rostov and Suzdal. And upon Mikhailo's death in 1176, Vsevolod succeeded him in Vladimir. He promptly subjugated the boyars and systematically raided the Volga peoples, notably in Volga, Bulgaria, and he installed puppet rulers on the throne of Novgorod, and he married his daughters off to princes in Chernihiv and Kyiv to solidify his control. Vsevolod's going to show a little mercy to anybody who disobeyed his commands. In 1180 and 1187, he punished the princes of Ryazan by removing them from their lands. And he had to come back because they didn't learn the lesson, and in 1207, he burned both Ryazan and Belgorod to the ground. He was famous in a military fashion, too. His fame spread quickly. The tale of Ihor's campaign was thought to have been written during Vsevolod's reign and addresses him in this way. Great Prince Vsevolod, don't you think of flying here from afar to safeguard the paternal golden throne of Kyiv? For you can, with your oars, scatter in the drops the Volga, and with your helms scoop dry the Don. And that reference to using helms to scoop the Don dry, that was supposed to be a symbolic thing of, if you achieved a military victory, you were supposed to take your helm and scoop water out of the river that was nearby. You drink from it. That symbolizes your victory. Okay. But matters about Kyiv didn't really concern Vsevolod during the latter part of his reign. He was concentrating on building his own capital, Vladimir. And, His wife, Maria, really devoted herself to works of piety and founded several convents and was glorified by the Russian church as a saint. Um, by the way, Vsevolod, the way he got the name Big Nest, Maria evidently gave him 14 kids or more. So, during Vsevolod's reign of 36 years, the city of Vladimir that reaches the zenith of its glory. But now, before his death, Vsevolod's going to be dividing his territory between his sons, and the second oldest son, Yuri, second oldest son, he's going to be receiving the largest share. And he's going to assign his eldest son, Constantine, the job of being Prince of Rostov. The plan was, when Vsevolod Bigness died, Constantine, who was Prince of Rostov, would become the Grand Prince upon his death. And Rostov would be passed on to Yuri. But Constantine wasn't good on this plan because he had become quite fond of the Principality of Rostov. And he was quite attached to it. He oversaw a lot of construction work there. So Vsevolod, in response, disinherited him completely and said that Yuri's going to be Grand Prince. So Vsevolod dies in 1212, and, as I got already decided, Yuri becomes Grand Prince of Vladimir, and he's going to be known as Yuri II. Constantine's really not happy with this situation at all, and he allies himself with Prince Mstislav Mstislavich, the Bold of Novgorod, who's later become the ruler of Galicia. And he's going to go after his brother. The coalition met Yuri in battle close to the Lipitsa River, and Yuri was defeated and forced to flee, allowing Constantine to take the throne. Constantine doesn't keep the throne very long. He dies in 1218. And Yuri II, he ends up coming back, and now he's Grand Prince of Vladimir again. But Constantine's got descendants that are going to retain the towns of Rostov and Yaroslavl, and they're going to reign there until probably the late 15th century. And so there's like numerous princely families of Russia that issue from this prince. Yuri II, also known as George II of Vladimir, or as Georgy II, the seventh child and the third and best loved son of Vsevolod III, Vsevolod Big Nest, was now the fourth Grand Prince of Vladimir. Or was that the fourth and sixth Grand Prince of Vladimir? For the most part, Yuri, or Georgy, proved to be pretty sharp as far as being a ruler. He installed his younger brother Yaroslav in Novgorod to rule there, and during his reign in Vladimir, Yuri and his brother Sviatoslav, they waged war, or several wars, against Volga, Bulgaria, to get revenge for previous raids into Rus lands, and founded the fortress of Nizhny Novgorod, Novgorod on the lower grounds, where the Oka River flows into the Volga River, to secure the area from Bulgarian attacks. He also had the misfortune of reigning over the Principality of Vladimir Suzdal at the time of the Mongol invasion of Kyivan Rus. When the Mongols first approached Russia in 1223, he sent a small unit against them, but it arrived too late to take part in the disastrous Battle of the Kalka River in May of that year. When the Mongols returned in 1237, Yuri treated their envoys with disdain. And he didn't help out Ryazan when Batu Khan laid siege to that city in December of that year. His own capital was next in line to be besieged. Yuri's sons were soundly defeated near Kolomna. Yuri barely escaped to Yaroslavl. His family either died in Vladimir when the cathedral they took refuge in collapsed due to fire, or that several members of his family, including his wife Agatha, were captured by the Mongols. In March of 1238, Yuri is killed. And this is at the Battle of the Sit River. Vast Mongol hordes just overwhelm the army of Vladimir Suzdal, and the Mongols continue on to devastate other major cities of Vladimir Suzdal. And so Kyivan Rus just pretty much disintegrates, and the successor principalities, they pay tribute to the Golden Horde, the so-called Tatar yoke. And so from the mid-13th century until the mid-15th centuries, princes of northeastern Rus, they're going to receive a yardalik, and that was like a special edict of the Golden Horde Khan by which they governed those principalities. Okay, so next steps, I'm going to move into the Mongol invasion and kind of cover that in a bit more detail. I also have to talk about the city of Novgorod because that's going to kind of connect with some of the folklore stuff. Also because Novgorod does things a little bit differently. So I'm hoping you continue to follow the channel. I hope you subscribe because that'd be like really cool. Until the next time, do побачення.